Hey, first of all, just a reminder that next week, Wednesday, we will once again meet with our living groups. You should be getting a note from your senior leaders later this week about all of that, but we look forward to those small groups. But today we have the privilege of gathering together for worship. And I'm going to invite all of you to stand with me as I read our call to worship from Psalm 145. Hear the word of the Lord. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. One generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts. They speak of the glorious splendor of your majesty, and I'll meditate on your wonderful works. They tell of the power of your awesome works, so I'll proclaim your great deeds. They celebrate your abundant goodness, so joyfully we'll sing of your righteousness. And we're going to do that here in just a moment. Mrs. Steventon, who helps lead music for our middle school, is going to lead us in worship in just a moment. Before we turn that over to sing praises to God, would you pray with me? Father, we thank you so much for another opportunity we have to gather together as a student body. God, I know it's easy for us to take moments like these for granted. We just show up here on Wednesday mornings, but God, we know that you want to speak to us. You want to reveal yourself to us. You do that through your word. You do that through people. And today, as we get to hear a testimony of how you've been at work molding and shaping and revealing yourself to our friends, God, I pray that our hearts and our minds would be open and receptive and that you would have a message for us in that. And in just a moment, God, as we lift our voices together to sing praises to you, I pray, Father, that you would receive the honor and glory that you deserve. So again, God, we thank you for bringing us together, and we ask that you would bless our time here. It's in your name we pray it. Amen.
All right, would you guys join me in singing the goodness of God? I love you, Lord, and your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me.
Well, good morning, Sioux Falls Christian High School. It's great to be with you this morning. That song that Mrs. Steventon just sang, very fitting for who I'm going to introduce to you today. The gentleman to my left and Heather. I've known him for, boy, a long time, 30 plus, 35 years maybe. And when I hear the words that we just sang, all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you've been so, so good. Paul hasn't been in this wheelchair all his life, and God has still been so, so good to him. And I've known him in many ways. He has had 3 kids that have graduated from Sioux Falls Christian, Taylor, Alex, and Maddie. And Maddie, a junior at South Dakota State. Final year at South Dakota State. And 2 boys are around here. So Paul's going to share his story with you today. And he's going to share it through, Heather's going to interview him. This is Heather Kittleson, and she's a friend of our school as well. But when we were able to tell Paul or ask Paul if he would do this, I was thrilled when he said yes, because he's got a story. And please listen intently how his story has touched many people, including me, and I think it's going to touch you as well. So this is Paul DeYoung, father, follower of God, former business owner, great guy. So, and Heather Kittleson. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for allowing us to be here with you today. As Jay said, Paul is quite the man. He's an Iowa native from Sheldon, Iowa. Any Sheldon, Iowa folks in here? Kids? I know there's a lot of Iowa kids from this area. No, none of you are, right? Just parents. There's a lot of parents that have, yes, that's what I'm thinking of, a lot of parents.
Unity Christian in Orange City, Iowa, so you might have some connections there.
Yeah. And 30 years plus, he was the owner of Landscape Garden Centers. So I'm sure many of you have heard of Landscape Garden Center. He actually started at age 22, and he worked his way all the way from planting one tree to becoming the CEO of an organization that he did incredible things in Sioux Falls. And so Paul, as Jay said, has 3 kids, and I know that Paul has a funny story about one of them and your principal, so I want to ask him what that story is.
Yes, a couple of years, it's been several years ago, my daughter Maddie was in the state tournament. I believe it was their junior or senior year. I was in Watertown, and we sat by your principal, Mr. Van Nieuwenhuizen, and my son Alex was kind of a class clown or cut up, so I think he found himself in Mr. Van Nieuwenhuizen's office occasionally. So we hung out with Mr. Van Nieuwenhuizen, sat at I met the game. Alex and him were chatting away. Then they went to the Terry Redland. It was just the 3 of us. They had a great time. And Alex, got in my pick when we were leaving. He said, "I can't believe how nice a guy you got to be since I was in high school." So remember, your relationships with your teachers now, they love you, they care for you. They just have to occasionally guide you in the right direction, but they're real people as well. But I thought that was kind of a neat story.
I'm glad Alex continues to be a stand-up man and still has a great sense of humor. Paul and I met about 3 years ago. We served on the Arboretum board together, and we'll get into how we actually met, because it's a pretty humorous story. But Jay and Rachel and Paul and I frequently have lunches, and one lunch, Jay looked at Paul and he said, "You are the perfect example of the statement, bloom where you are planted." And I want to ask Paul what that means to him. After Jay said that, that has kind of become Paul's theme, and there's a lot to it. So I want to ask, Paul, what does that mean to you?
I'll tell you a little bit of my story. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's 9 years ago, and the doctor said the best thing you can do is get as much stress out of your life as possible and do physical rehab. So at that point, I started selling out my shares in the company, and I started physical therapy diligently. And the first 3 or 4 years, I thought, I got this. I could tell some I was shuffling my feet, not swinging my arms. And it was slowly taking some of my ability away. Then about 3-4 years ago, I kind of fell off the ledge. I had a stressful situation. And so I lost the ability to drive, which is an ability that's sorely missed, because when you're not mobile, that's a kind of a lonely thing. I still live in my house, and I had fallen several times. My kids are all grown, and we decided I should. So I sold my pickup to my youngest son, so I lost the ability to drive. I lost the ability to go to my workplace. I'd go there about once a week, but it was just too dangerous. And I was confined to my house, so I made the decision to go to Touchmark, which is a assisted living facility. And for the life of me, I never thought I'd be that guy where I was going to be in assisted living when I was in my early 60s. So I moped around. I had a really tough time. And it came to me, what Jay had said. My mother actually had a magnet on her fridge when I was growing up that said, "Bloom where you're planted." So what it's saying to me is that isn't necessarily what I wanted to be, where I wanted to be. It wouldn't have been my first choice. But being as I was in the horticulture business, that really struck a chord with me, because you can root and grow and bloom wherever you're at. You might not be in the place you want to be long term, but you can always be transplanted. Like in horticulture, you can move plants, or you could set roots permanently. And like the verse says, like it's Matthew 15 verse 16, you didn't choose me, I chose you, so go forth and bear fruit that will last forever and ever. So it could either be a temporary, or you could do it for the long term. So that's kind of what that phrase, I don't know if I'm getting too wordy with that, but that's what that means to me. And that's why there's bracelets and keychains and stickers. Some of you probably grabbed those as you were coming in. Be welcome to grab some more when you're on your way out. Because that way, for some of you, it gives you a reminder. You could put it on your backpack or wear it on your wrist, but it's a good reminder of wherever we're at in life. It's not a forever thing unless we choose it to be that way. The only thing that's forever is our faith and commitment to God.
One thing that I've learned from Paul with everything that he just said is there's two different kinds of people. And one is life happens to you, and the other one is life happens for you. And regardless of any circumstances that Paul has been dealt with, he blooms where he's planted, and he scatters seeds everywhere he goes, which is such a beautiful saying of everywhere we go, we have the opportunity to truly bless someone and plant a seed that will forever grow in their heart. And I know that you get taught that here at Sioux Falls Christian, and so Paul's a perfect example of that. And a couple other lessons he's taught me is that when you fall, especially when you are someone who all of a sudden starts losing your balance and starts shuffling your feet, and the more and more he was falling, he had to physically learn how to fall forward. And metaphorically, there's a way to think about that as well. So Paul wants to talk about when you fall forward.
Because there will come a time in your life, you're in a great situation now, and some of you had challenges, some of you much more than others. But it can be a cold, hard world out there. There'll come a time that you'll fail, you'll not be good at something, you will embarrass yourself. But that's where, if you fall, and then individuals always say you need something to fall back on. My metaphor is fall forward. That way you learn something. You can catch yourself on the way down. So fall down 7 times, get up 8. The old metaphor goes. So a doctor told me that to fall forward, and I kind of says that reminds me of, we all know we're going to fall in life, but we fall forward. That way it breaks our fall and we can get back up.
My husband and I have a podcast called Fortitude. And we interviewed Paul because his story is not just about Parkinson's, and it's not just about him having to retire after 30 years of running a very successful business. He also had a few other circumstances that happened to him. And so he has lived a life that I kind of similar to our world today as Job. And how he has come out of every single situation is mind-blowing to me, because we all go through different stories, or we all have our own story, And your story is very important, it's very valid. And how you get up and how you go through life with surrounding yourself with really good people is something that Paul does not mess around with. He values and loves the people who come around him and support him. And so he's done the same thing to so many people who love him. And so, Paul, I would love for you to share a little bit more about your full story of the things that you've really overcome.
I think Heather gives me a lot of credit, so I'll share part of my story. When I was in my mid-20s, I was on my way to work, and I was in a serious car accident. So I broke my sternum, broke my ribs, broke both my legs. My ankles were compound fractures, so bones are sticking out. And I recovered from that, but since that time, I've had chronic pain in my legs, from my upper leg, my hip, and my femur broke. So, and then fast forward, so I was 26 at that time, and then I was 40. My wife, Lisa, and I went to Cozumel. We had really not taken many vacations. And we were back home, but I had this persistent, I call it welt, or sore on my leg. So I went to the doctor. He put me on antibiotics and laced it. And then I went to a Sioux Falls Christian basketball game in McCook. I'll never forget that night. My oldest son, Tyler, was with me. And I started getting real feverish and confused, so I missed the exit to Sioux Falls. We got home, and my youngest daughter, Madison, had RSV, so I didn't want to disrupt the apple cart. So we slept the night, and then that morning, I was violently sick all night. And then in the morning, my leg this leg especially, was twice the size of normal. So my wife brought me to the ER, and I was septic, of course, very septic, very life-threatening circumstance. They put me in intensive care, and I found out the only way to stop flesh, it's called necrotizing fasciitis or flesh-eating infection. They had one case. It was Sioux Valley Hospital at that time, now Sanford. And the only way to fight it is because it kills soft tissue at an inch an hour. It doesn't kill muscle tissue, but once you're septic, you come to that. And they didn't know really how to approach it. One individual had been diagnosed with it there and passed away. And there happened to be a surgeon that had trained in Orange County, California, where it started with a brown recluse spider bite, where that spider is more common in California. So they were baffled, and I was basically dying. And then this surgeon, I've never met him. He knew what to do, because his professor said, if you ever see this, you'll probably never see this disease, but if you do, I want you to know how to treat it. So he took me into emergency surgery, and he was in Fargo, North Dakota. He just happened to be there for the weekend on call. So I just remember I remember him dressed in black. I thought he was a priest. I thought he was giving me last rites. And I came through. He saved my life that time. So you can say I've had bad luck or the great power of God saved me. And then fast forward till my early 40s, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. That's slowly taken my ability to get dressed on my own, to use the restroom facilities alone, to do basically anything, to use a fork and knife. And I'm at the point where I'm going to have to go this is my sweet spot of the day, I'm going to have to go into a higher level of care. But when I went in there, I decided I was going to bloom where I was planted. I was going to bless as many people as I could. But what you don't realize, I'm the youngest guy in the crowd. So these 90-year-old ladies, and they're helping me cut my meat at dinner. So I thought I was going to bless everybody, but I've been blessed 10 times over. So, and that got kind of lengthy. So my son once said, Dad, you haven't had much luck. He said, you kind of got screwed. And I said, I've been lucky because I survived an accident. You kids were born. I got to raise you to adulthood. And now I hopefully have a few years left with you. So I've been very blessed. So it all depends how you spin it.
Crazy, huh? Like just one thing after another, and he still stands before you, sits before you, and he looks at it as all a blessing because he's learned so much, and he has the ability to sit before you and say, hey, I survived. I'm a survivor. I've overcome. And we often talk about the people that we surround ourselves with. And so through all of this, he's had a lot of support and a lot of love from people, especially his family and his friends. And when we first met, he walked into the Arboretum meeting, and I had never met Paul before. I was new to the board. He wanted us to share this story because it's such a great example of being curious and asking questions that sometimes maybe come across a little bold, as Paul will tell you. But due to curiosity and due to just asking questions that come to mind, it can start a really beautiful friendship. And so as I was sitting in City Hall, downtown Sioux Falls, I heard some clunking come through the door behind me. It was like clunk, 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 and he had his walker. And I flip around and I look at him, and as he is trying to get sat down, moved his chair and he sat down, and I kept kind of looking at him thinking, man, this guy's young. I wonder what his deal is. And so as the meeting was over, I just turned and I looked at him and I said, hey, so what's with the walker? And he just turned, he looked right back at me and he said, well, aren't you a bold soul? And since then, we have become dear friends. My husband Amos and I have really taken Paul to heart, and we visit him often. My 3 little girls and my son, I have 4 kids, we visit Paul all the time. They draw him pictures, we hang him up on his fridge. And I just think it's something that is a great lesson to learn for all of you, and that is asking the really unique, curious questions, because you never know what God has in store for you. You never know the friendships that you might get or the blessings that you might get to be to others just by stepping out of your comfort zone and into a place that maybe seems a little unfamiliar. And so Paul wants to talk a little bit about how to approach a situation like that. When you see someone in a wheelchair, you see someone with a different ability, just how to approach that with a really beautiful way and a kind heart.
Because it's easy to look at yourself as disabled. There's a lot of things I cannot do, but in reverse, God has blessed me with many things I never had being part of my life in return. So it's kind of been an even Steven. But like I go to a few basketball games, and I never want to be seen as a victim. Like I've had people talk very soft to me, like, how you doing, Paul? Or they talk really loud, like you can't hear anymore. And they all mean well, but keep that in mind. Most people don't have the victim mentality. I'm still in here. I'm still the same guy. I may not talk as clear as I used to or have as much stamina, but I'm still the same person. So, and look this up, you can Google it. There's a training video on Chick-fil-A. Is it Chick-fil-A or Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A. It's an employee training, and it's titled Everyone. I don't know if you've seen that, Luke. Everyone has a story. So look that up, and it shows like the cashiers and some, there's customers, and they talk about one, their son has just been deployed to, one has lost a husband. So everybody's mourning in some way. Everybody has something going on in their life. Maybe it's a teenager that's giving a parent stress, not pointing any fingers. But I thought that was a good example of how you search out people, and or in the grocery store line, you can make a difference. You never know how bad somebody's hurting. So when Heather introduced herself, I was at the bottom of the pit. I was so depressed, and because I went through, and I have a hard time saying this, I went through a very painful divorce at that time too, so that was very, very trying too. So I was at the bottom of the pit, and then I met Heather, and she invited me on the podcast, which was a little out of my comfort zone, but it got me building up. So then I decided, well, like the old saying, you can help one person at a time. That makes you feel better, because it's the most selfish thing a person can do, because the person giving the love is actually getting as much out of it, if not more, than the person receiving them.
We have the ability to touch people every single day in a really beautiful way. And a different time, a different day, my story also, I will just simply say that we have to surround ourselves with individuals who love us and love us unconditionally. And I always say love big. And not just to the people around you that you know, but to those who are strangers in the parking lot, in the checkout aisle, different meetings that you're at. You never know who God wants you to touch in a beautiful way because of their story. And so be bold and go out of your comfort zone and just look someone in the eye and say, hey, what's the best thing that's happened to you today? Versus, hey, how are you? Good, good. And then you keep going on about your day. It's so important that we engage with people. People are starving for connection and community, and all of you have something to give, every single one of you. Open the door. That's something I've asked Paul. Does it offend you? You guys have probably heard of Trenton Bass, who was the football player that was paralyzed from the Hills Beaver Creek area. He lives right next to me, and he's on the podcast, and we've had a great conversation about that. Like, do you get offended if someone steps out and helps you or opens a door or you drop something and you pick it up? And hands down, you will hear individuals who have gone through some really tough stuff say, man, it means the world when someone actually will open the door for me and not just stare at me. Because again, he's all here. Paul's one of the most wise individuals, and to tap into the wisdom that this man has been a huge blessing on me and my kids and my husband. So do you want to speak a little bit about the friends that you hang out with?
Yes, you can elevate yourself with your group of friends. Like my father used to say when I was in high school, birds of a feather flock together, which wasn't a compliment to me at the time. I wasn't the model student or model child at that time. But that's really a good point. And I equate it to strands in a rope, because say you got a piece of twine or rope that has 6 strands in it. When it puts pressure on, or downward pressure, if it's a single strand, it would snap. But the rope, they all bind together to make it stronger. It's like if you play any sporting events or school events, you pull together, and your staff does too. What other shortcomings may be, the rope, they all kind of bind each other and make each other stronger. I always looked at my company, it was like that too. There is so many areas of expertise. If somebody didn't know one thing, you could network with the other. So always network and be able to lean on one another.
When life does happen, which I really believe we don't ever go through life just skipping along without tripping and falling periodically. And so those you do hang around, those you consider your best friends, or those that are what we like to say ride or die, take a real honest, hard look at that. Because when things happen and life gets really, really hard, are they going to be there for you? And it's such a beautiful thing when you can look at someone and think this is a forever thing. But friends also can really influence one way or the other. And you've probably heard this multiple times. It's kind of a parent thing that we tell our kids all the time, but really pay attention to who you hang out with and who you show up as a child of God. Because God has big things for everybody, regardless of the circumstances and your story. How you show up is really important. And so with that, goals. People will talk about goals and how important goals are in your life. And Paul has a good way of talking about how you got to be a little flexible. Goals are good, but why? Explain a little bit just how goals you mentioned are important.
I have to tell you, Parkinson's causes it paralyzes your face, so my animation isn't as upbeat as it seems, but I'm still in here. But goals, I believe in journaling, writing down your goals. Dreams without goals are just dreams. They'll never happen. And you got to hold yourself accountable for those. And some of you want to be doctors, some of you nurses, some make a lot of money. There's nothing wrong. I have no problem with making money. It's not evil. It's how you use it for the betterment of the world. But sometimes you can be so tunnel vision with your final goal, and life happens, because you can either walk right by obvious landing places, or you got to be flexible, because if you get too tunnel vision, you're going to walk right back by opportunities that present themselves, or God tapping on your shoulder. So I believe in mid-range goals and not so much on in long term, you got to stay flexible because you change as a human being. And we'll talk about that in one of the next questions before you leave. But so journal your goals, write them down because also it's likely they'll never happen.
When it comes to generational gratitude, that is something that I know you wanted to mention to these kids, just about how blessed they are and the generations before them and the sacrifices.
Yes, because I know a lot of you are blessed to have parents, or maybe you've lost some, but grandparents are a treasure, and your parents, there come a time, life goes pretty quickly, decades go pretty fast, so, and hopefully your parents are here for many years, but you'll hopefully get to see them grow old too, but life comes full circle, and the best thing we can have in life is, or the biggest honor we can have in life is to care for somebody that used to take care of us. So seek your grandparents' advice and parents' advice because they've been through the school of hard knocks and they've sacrificed a lot for you. I know I went to a Christian high school, and I look back, I don't think I realized how much my parents sacrificed at the time. So you're living the dream now. But there's a cold, this is kind of grim, but you're going to get knocked down in life. Things aren't always going to be pretty, so you got to be resilient and just keep your faith in God. I had a very wise man, and David Rosebohm is his name, and I had another classmate that had lost his wife to cancer, and he said the wisest advice was from Dave Rosebohm. He said, you just got to walk through it. There is no frills, and I've been through some tough times where there's time you just got to walk through it with God. You might not feel him holding your hand at that time, but you get through it. And now there's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is the means of an end result, where joy is something given by God that's in your heart eternally. So don't consider them the same thing.
So speaking of the joy and the foundation in Christ, can you speak about, you guys get taught all the time, and it's such a blessing that your foundation here is that of Jesus Christ and his story and having a relationship with him. But the foundation, not even just your generational foundation, what has been set before you, but just your relationship with Jesus Christ. Paul, how has that affected you and got you through all of this?
It's been amazing because kind of like lifting weights or exercise, you never grow or get in better shape by doing nothing. You have to be tempered or built. So when you go through difficult times, that's when you have an opportunity to learn. I've always been textbook serving. I always had a relationship with Jesus Christ. I didn't outward. I would have had a hard time 10 years ago sitting up here and talking about my religious values. I just didn't wear them on my shirt sleeve, but it's made me a more outward believer of Christ. And I want to share my story not out of sympathy or gain notoriety. I want to share some of my advice, and it only has to reach one person. And I know, like I said, sometimes my words are harder to spit out, so so my response to my ability, I still have the ability to talk, so what's my response going to be to that? So that's what I look at. This responsibility is 2 words.
I know it's time for you all to get back, so we want to leave you with one last thing that Paul, it's 10:25, right, Jay? Is that the time you guys got to get out of here? Be the hero of your own story. You have a lot of wonderful, wise people around you at all times, so tap into that. Seek people who can teach you, but there's one thing Paul wants to leave you with, and that is be the hero of your own story.
Yes, that's right, because we all talk about heroes. Some may be professional athletes, some may be a teacher or a counselor, and seek out wise counsel. But I heard a story once, and it was shared, but I'll never forget that. This older gentleman, that could be me or any age, asked this younger person, well, who's your hero? So he said, I don't know, that's a tough one, let me get back to you. So the gentleman went and asked him, and he said, who's your hero? And he says, well, it's me in 5 years. And he said, you in 5 years? He said, yeah, because it's me, because I'm going to keep getting better and better. So he came back 5 years later, are you your hero now? And he said, no, not even close. But by going every 5, it could be 10 years, you're reassessing yourself every year. So you reinvent yourself you'll be entirely different people in 5 years. So you always got to be shooting for the stars to be your own hero, and you'll never achieve that, but that gives you a landing place, whether you're at rock bottom to take off from. So, and I think we're about out of time here.
So bloom where you're planted and be your own hero. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Appreciate it.